Well, good day, everybody. Welcome from London. We are here at the London School of Economics. My name is Professor Cox. I've been at the LSE for 20 years, and my good friend, Professor Estrin from the Department of Management, has been here for many, many years indeed. Professor Estrin works in the management department. I used to work in the international relations department, but now I'm a founding director of a think tank here at the LSE called LSE Ideas. Our good friend Daniel Wong from AGLP asked us to say a few things here from the LSE about how we see the world, how the world is moving, and what is the future for the world in the environment in which we now find ourselves, with a new president in the United States, a COVID pandemic, which is still ongoing, but vaccines being delivered to many parts of the world. And so we want to reflect on the current situation and give you some of our insights here from the LSE as part of this grand launch of the AI People Management Platform. So I'm going to hand over straight away to Professor Estrin to start the conversation rolling by asking me a question. Professor Estrin.
Thank you, Mick. Well, we all know how hard COVID has hit the USA and indeed the UK. What I want to ask you is, how do you think COVID has impacted on America's overall position in the world, but particularly its position in Asia? We've now got a new president. Biden, of course, won the election. Do you think that under Biden, the US is going to recover from its somewhat debilitated position under Trump?
Well, we can only wait and see, and never make a prediction, as I always say, either in economics or in international relations, Saul. But I'll say three things. Firstly, we should never underestimate the structural, economic, military power and the attractive power of the United States. Even under Trump, the United States still remained immensely powerful and immensely forceful, and an immense force for either for good or for bad. So I want to start with that one. Many people have talked about America being in decline. I'm a little bit more of a skeptic on that one. But there's no doubt either that Trump did damage to alliances, and many people within Asia, I know, Southeast Asia, ASEAN, got very concerned about the position taken by Trump on alliances and how committed the United States was to the region and the security and the economics of the region. Let me just say something too about America's position. Even though it has enormous structural power, as I mentioned, even in spite of Trump, nonetheless, its soft power position, I think, was seriously damaged, and it's going to take quite a long time for that soft power position to be restored. I think there's a question of credibility, and I think one of the great jobs that Joe Biden has in front of him is actually how to restore that credibility. However, overall, I think for America's allies in the region, right across the region, Japan, Southeast Asian countries, Indonesia, Singapore, South Korea, and many, many others indeed, I think it's actually a moment of some optimism that we may have now what I would almost call a more normal foreign policy team running American foreign policy. And I think that's going to be very good for reassuring allies within the region about America's longer term intentions. They lost that, I think, during the Trump years, and this is therefore only to be welcomed, I think. However, I'd also make the point, given that China is such a big player within the region, that although I think Trump talked tough on China, talked trade wars on China, and clearly identified China as the number one rising challenge to the United States, both in the world and in Asia, I think there is going to be not so much change in the American position towards China. I think there is a view right across the political spectrum. It's almost a consensus now that if China is the great challenge, then indeed the United States has to stand up to that challenge. So although I think we're going to see a toning down of the rhetoric, I'm not sure we're going to see a fundamental change in policies. This therefore means for Southeast Asia that that's still going to be caught, the region and the countries in that are still going to be caught between the two great superpowers, if you like, the United States and China, and how they evolve their policies and develop their strategies is going to, I think, be the great challenges for countries in the region and, of course, for ASEAN as an organization. Saul, I want to now ask you a question. You're the economist. You've done a lot of work, I know, on developing countries, emerging economies. You've done a lot of work on Southeast Asia and on China. The question I want to ask you is, where do you think the world economy is going to go post-COVID? Are we ever going to return to something called normal? And where do you think China is going to fit into this?
Well, of course, that's the big question that everyone's asking, Mick. And forecasting. My crystal ball is not that much better than anyone else's, but I think we can see bring a little bit of analysis to bear on that question. First of all, I think it's important to see that COVID. The main effect of COVID seems to be accelerating trends that already existed. So we were beginning to see already back in 2015 a move away from total globalization, the total integration of the world economy together. And we were beginning to see that partly politically because of economic nationalism in Europe, in Britain, in the United States, but also because just of technological changes and other changes. And what's going on here, I think, is COVID is accelerating that process. And I think we're going to see in a post-COVID world less integration into a global value chain system and more reliance on regional systems. So what that means is associations between the Southeast Asian countries and their links to China may get stronger, whereas their links perhaps to America or to Europe may not develop quite as rapidly. So I think that's the first thing. The second trend that I think is accelerating is the trend towards manufacturing becoming more decentralized and more automated. I think we're going to see more and more use of robots, of AI in manufacturing, of 3D printing. And what that's going to mean is that more manufacturing is going to occur at home in developed countries, and the productivity of emerging economies is going to rise as they apply more and more capital to their production processes. I think if I come now to your specific question about China, China really got a grip on the spread of the pandemic very quickly. I mean, the SARS experience obviously helped them. So they sort of knew what they were doing. They were able to manufacture the relevant equipment, PPE equipment really quickly. And they had a really good track and trace system. And so they managed to get a handle on this. Now, the recession that in the developed countries is associated essentially with lockdowns, government is preventing firms from producing, has stopped in China for the most part. They're obviously aware of potential future dangers, but China has seen something like a V-shaped recovery. The economy has recovered very quickly. And that means, whereas of course, if you look at the US or the UK, we're still mired in a post-COVID recession, and we seem likely to be so for some time. So the gap between China and the West is narrowing, interestingly, in this period. So what COVID seems likely to do is to further accelerate the trend whereby the economic power of Europe or North America or Japan weakens relative to that of China and of Southeast Asia more generally. Maybe I'll stop there.
Okay, thanks, Saul. Those are fascinating insights, and I think reinforces arguments that we find being put round over the last few years about the economic shift away from the West, from the transatlantic region towards Asia and towards the Pacific. And what you seem to be saying, and I think it's a very, very important conclusion to arrive at, that Asia is simply going to become far more important going forward. COVID or no COVID in many ways, but what COVID is doing is actually accelerating trends which were already there. From my point of view, from the United States point of view, looking at it from the US point of view, I think this is going to be hugely challenging going forward, because the fundamentals of that shift are still going to be going on, maybe more quickly, as you've already suggested, and that China isn't going to go away. And China's position is actually stronger now, relatively speaking, than it was 6 months ago, in part because they've dealt with the COVID crisis so much more successfully, it seems anyway, from everything we're reading, than has the United States, which has a lot to do to recover, both politically as well as economically. Anyway, thanks very much, Saul, for those insights. I hope everybody out there has gained some insights themselves from our reflections, and we look forward to meeting you, hopefully, at some point, if if in 2021, hopefully in 2022, over here in London at the London School of Economics. So I'll say farewell from Professor Estrin and from myself, Professor Michael Cox. Farewell.
Bye-bye.